Hey guys, tonight we step into Elizabethan London, a city wrapped in smoke, timber, and the faint tang of the Thames, where the air tastes like soot and ale in equal measure. You trudge through narrow, cobbled streets that twist and turn like a ribbon of shadow, lanterns flickering against brick and plaster, and you probably won't survive noticing how each window hides a story you weren't meant to hear. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's strangely satisfying to imagine someone watching from a completely different star map. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You can feel it immediately, that hum in the city that seems both alive and wary. The market smells of freshly baked bread, horse dung, and the faint metallic tang of blood from some butcher's slab nearby. Children run with bare feet, their laughter echoing against timber frames, while merchants call out their wares in voices roughened by smoke and ale. London in the late 1500s is a symphony of disorder, and somewhere above it all, the Queen's astronomer sets up his instruments, peering into a world of invisible signals and celestial whispers. Historians still argue whether astronomers were mere stargazers or secret intelligence agents, but tonight, you don't care. You just want to see the sky as someone powerful might. You trudge past a crooked sign for the star and compass, and it feels oddly like a message meant just for you. Smoke curls from chimneys like ghosts of forgotten omens, while torches gutter and pop in the evening wind. Somewhere, a dog barks at an unseen intruder, perhaps a rat, perhaps a comet, who can say. You duck under a low beam, bump your shoulder on a stranger, and hear a whispered curse you almost think is directed at you. Oddly enough, this is comforting. If danger is everywhere, at least it's shared. Turning a corner, the city opens up to the river. The Thames is dark, a mirror for the moon that has yet to rise fully, reflecting a sky so crisp it almost hurts your eyes to look at. You notice small boats tied to the banks, their hulls creaking like tired old men, and think about how traders use stars to navigate these waters. Fringe thought. Some sailors swore that if you whispered your wish to a reflection of the moon in the Thames, the tides would answer. You smile, shake your head, and keep moving. Superstition has a funny way of sneaking into even the most logical minds. Ahead atop a lean tower of timber and brick is your destination, the Queen's Observatory. From here, the city shrinks to toy-like proportions. You climb the stairs, each step a groaning protest until the cobbled streets feel miles below. Instruments of brass and wood, strange telescopes with eyepieces small as a coin, and star charts scribbled in the cramped, looping hand of someone who spent their life balancing observation and fear, surround you. You brush dust off a table, revealing a detailed map of constellations. One quirk, a tiny sketch of a dragon curls around Orion's belt. Who put that there? Who knows? But it matters, because these symbols sometimes carry warnings, sometimes just whimsy, and sometimes secrets meant only for the Queen's eyes. Outside, the wind carries the scent of lavender from some distant window. You inhale, letting it calm your nerves. The city is loud, yes, and chaotic, but up here, everything falls into perspective. You can almost see the hidden code of London, the way smoke drifts, the way footsteps echo, the way lanterns bob along the streets below. And above all, the stars. Thousands of them, indifferent yet teasing, calling you to pay attention. You take a deep breath, realizing that each tiny pinprick of light could alter someone's fate, or at least the gossip circulating through Whitehall. You probably won't survive noticing all of it, but that's part of tonight's thrill. You trace the edges of the charts, feeling a shiver as your fingers brush a diagram of Venus, marked with strange annotations. The mainstream fact: Venus's movements were meticulously tracked by astronomers to predict events and sometimes favor certain courtiers. The fringe tidbit: some claimed Venus could influence love affairs directly, though historians still argue whether such claims were taken seriously at court. You smile wryly, superstition and science, hand in hand. The night deepens, stars glittering like pinholes in a cosmic curtain. From your vantage point, you can see the city's heartbeat. Lanterns flicker in rhythm, voices carry on the wind, and somewhere, a bell tolls softly, reminding you that even in a world ruled by celestial precision, time is measured differently here, by humans, by politics, and by fear. And as you set up a small, brass instrument to measure the height of the stars, you feel it, a quiet connection to something larger, something infinite and slightly mischievous. Like the city, like the queen, like the stars themselves, it demands attention, curiosity, and a touch of daring. You probably won't survive noticing everything tonight, but that's why it's worth it. You trudge up the narrow spiral staircase that twists like a corkscrew around the tower's central beam, each step groaning under your weight. The walls are plastered with charts and sketches, some so detailed you can almost see the quill strokes of the astronomer who spent years mapping the heavens. Your hands graze a brass quadrant mounted to the wall, and you pause to admire its engraved scales. Mainstream fact: instruments like this allowed precise measurements of star positions, crucial for navigation and astrology alike. Quirky tidbit: one eccentric astronomer insisted that placing a small rabbit's foot on the quadrant improved accuracy, though historians still argue whether this was serious or mere superstition. You shake your head, but the thought lingers, a soft chuckle rising in your throat. The observatory smells of old parchment, candle smoke, and a faint metallic tang, maybe leftover from ink or some mysterious chemical experiment. Outside, the wind rattles the wooden shutters, and you imagine the city sprawling beneath you, lanterns flickering like fireflies in the dark. You balance carefully on a narrow ledge, peering through a telescope with a polished brass barrel. The lens magnifies the stars, each one glowing as if teasing you with secrets. You probably won't survive noticing how some seem to pulse subtly, but your pulse quickens anyway. Maps cover the walls, overlapping and annotated in careful script. You see the familiar constellations, Orion, Cassiopeia, and a curious scribble near Draco that looks like a crown. Fringe fact: some astrologers believed that the constellation Draco could protect England from foreign threats, a notion still debated by scholars. You run your fingers over the charts, imagining the astronomer hunched here for hours, tracking planetary movements, predicting eclipses, and occasionally muttering to himself about omens in the ink. There's a charm in imagining these obsessions, a hint of madness that feels oddly comforting. You shuffle closer to a table cluttered with instruments, an astrolabe, a set of compasses, and a curious contraption resembling a miniature cannon with glass lenses. Secretly, it's designed to project star positions onto a flat surface, a Tudor planetarium, really. The astronomer had likely spent nights peering through it, adjusting tiny screws and whispering notes in a hand only he could read. You imagine him speaking softly. "Ah, Jupiter moves again. Watch your step, London." As if the city itself depended on celestial obedience. Historians still argue whether such devices were used for practical teaching or purely to impress courtiers. You can't decide which is more amusing: the thought that someone might have been teaching nobles astronomy, or that the nobles probably understood less than a third of it. The tower is not just a place of study, it's a theater of shadows. Candles flicker, casting distorted shapes across the walls, and your own shadow leaps and lunges like a mischievous specter. You stumble slightly over a loose floorboard, revealing a hidden drawer. Inside, you find tiny journals, scraps of parchment covered in arcane symbols, and a sealed envelope addressed simply, "To the Queen." You wonder what secrets these pages contain. Could it be predictions, political warnings? Love advice for a monarch. Fringe fact: some argue that astrologers often served as spies, encoding sensitive information in star charts. You shiver at the thought. You probably won't survive contemplating just how intertwined power and astronomy have become. You step back from the table and glance at the massive brass armillary sphere dominating one corner of the room. Its rings spin gently, aligned with the heavens above, and you feel a surreal thrill touching it, imagining the hands of the astronomer turning these rings centuries ago. Each motion, each adjustment, carries significance. Each calculation could affect lives in ways ordinary Londoners would never guess. You take a deep breath and note a small inscription hidden in plain sight. The stars do not lie, but people do. You nod, appreciating the quiet humor of someone centuries ahead of their time. Outside, the wind shifts again, carrying the scent of damp earth and smoke. You peer through the small, shuttered window, catching glimpses of rooftops and spires. Somewhere, a bell tolls and the sound seems to resonate with the instruments inside the tower. You remember that this observatory doesn't just exist in isolation. It interacts with the city below, the court above, and the skies beyond. The astronomer, a single figure amid all this, has a vantage that almost no one else possesses. And you, standing here, share a sliver of that rarefied perspective. Fringe thought. It was whispered that only the astronomer and the Queen truly understood certain planetary alignments, and even then, only some nights. You smile at the idea of being temporarily let in on that secret. You settle near a small telescope aimed at the horizon, where the last vestiges of sunset bleed into twilight. The faint glow of the city contrasts with the brilliance of the first stars emerging overhead. You probably won't survive noticing the way each star seems to wink at you, as if inviting complicity in the universe's eternal secrets. Candlelight flickers on brass, parchment, and polished wood, illuminating sketches of moons and planets, and you sense a strange intimacy with someone long gone. Someone who devoted their life to watching the heavens, while navigating a court where one misstep could mean disgrace, or worse. You rise slowly, tracing a finger over the edge of the quadrant once more, feeling its cold precision beneath your hand. The city hums far below, oblivious to the careful calculations, the comets tracked, and the coded messages hidden in constellations. And above it all, the stars continue to shimmer, indifferent to ambition, politics, and fear. Yet somehow in this tower, you feel the pulse of history beating alongside your own, each moment a delicate balance between knowledge, curiosity, and survival. You probably won't survive noticing all of it, but isn't that why you came? You sink into a worn stool by the table, eyes flicking over the scattered charts and star maps as the evening deepens. Each sheet of parchment is a miniature cosmos in itself, dotted with symbols, lines, and notes that only the astronomer can fully decipher. You trace the intricate patterns, imagining the hours spent plotting each star's movement. Mainstream fact: Tudor astronomers relied heavily on naked-eye observations, meticulously recording data night after night to predict celestial events. Quirky tidbit: one such astronomer reportedly wore a special cloak covered in tiny mirrors to reflect starlight for better tracking, though historians still argue whether this was serious or more a vanity project. You chuckle softly, letting the absurdity mix with awe, as your gaze drifts upward through the small, shuttered windows at the sky above London. The night is sharp, crisp, and brimming with possibilities. From this tower, the city sprawls like a living map, smoke curling from chimneys, lanterns flickering on winding streets, and the faint murmur of voices drifting on the cool air. Somewhere below, a cart rattles over cobbles, and a dog barks at a shadow that may or may not exist. You probably won't survive noticing how even these small, mundane sounds seem intertwined with the stars, how each ripple of activity mirrors in miniature the vast, ordered chaos above. The juxtaposition makes your heart quicken, the mundane and the infinite, side by side, like twin constellations in different skies. You lean over a freshly inked chart of the planets. Venus and Mars are drawn in meticulous loops, each with tiny annotations detailing their positions, predicted movements, and curiously, the astrologer's notes on moods and fortune. Fringe thought: some astrologers claim that Venus could influence not only love but the outcome of battles, depending on when it appeared in the night sky. Historians still argue whether this belief affected actual political decisions or was merely courtly theater. You grin at the audacity. Imagining generals checking star charts before launching campaigns seems equal parts hilarious and terrifying. Your eyes drift to a corner of the table where a small box contains tiny, hand-carved figurines of planets, moons, and even a miniature comet. Each piece can be rotated along delicate tracks, modeling the heavens in miniature. The mainstream fact: these early planetariums helped scholars visualize celestial movements and communicate them to the court. Quirky tidbit: one astronomer was said to whisper encouragements to his model planets, claiming it improved accuracy. You shake your head, chuckling quietly. You probably won't survive noticing just how human this obsession is, the mix of science, superstition, and sheer love of complexity. The wind rattles the shutters, carrying scents from the streets below: smoke, salted fish, and the faint tang of something herbal, maybe lavender or sage. You lean forward, peering through a small telescope aimed at the horizon. Constellations slowly emerge, glittering pins on a velvet backdrop. You note how Orion's belt aligns almost perfectly with a distant chimney line. A coincidence, perhaps, or maybe an astrologer's playful adjustment. Fringe observation: some astronomers deliberately plotted star charts to align with landmarks, though historians still argue whether these were practical tools or secret messages for the Queen. You shiver at the thought. The idea that a simple alignment could carry coded meaning seems both brilliant and slightly terrifying. Your hands move over the quill-strewn table, pausing at a small, leather-bound notebook. Inside, calculations leap off the pages: angles, degrees, notes on lunar eclipses, and predictions of comets yet to arrive. You probably won't survive thinking about the precision required, the patience, the hours spent under cold, starry skies while London slept obliviously below. Each entry is a marriage of observation and imagination. The astronomer interprets raw celestial mechanics and transforms them into narratives that could sway political opinion, forecast harvests, or predict courtly favor. You glance up and notice a faint glow at the horizon, Jupiter rising behind a cluster of buildings. The astronomer's notes indicate this is significant, perhaps signaling a time for action, or maybe a gentle warning to someone who knows how to read it. Fringe speculation: some argue Jupiter's position influenced the temperament of advisors and courtiers, though historians still debate whether Elizabeth herself took such guidance seriously. You smile at the audacity of it, imagining the Queen pausing to check a telescope before dinner. As the night stretches on, the charts, instruments, and celestial models merge into a delicate choreography. You can almost hear the astronomer's voice murmuring in your ear: watch, note, interpret, always remember that the heavens whisper truths only the brave dare to catch. Outside, London remains oblivious, its inhabitants unaware that every flicker of lantern light, every curling wisp of smoke, is mirrored in the patient glow of distant stars. You probably won't survive noticing just how small and fleeting everything seems, yet how monumental it all becomes when placed against the vast, infinite sky. You lean back, letting the quiet wash over you, and for a brief moment time seems suspended. Each star above, each chart below, carries its own secret, its own story. And you, perched in this tower, are caught in the middle, a witness to the eternal dance of observation, interpretation, and human curiosity. The city below sleeps, the sky above watches, and you, caught in between, realize that charting the unseen is as much about understanding yourself as it is about the stars. You descend from the tower slowly, letting the weight of observation settle into your bones. The streets of Whitehall stretch out before you, darkened and almost conspiratorial, lanterns swaying as if whispering secrets to one another. You probably won't survive noticing how every shadow seems to have a story, every echo a hidden agenda. Historians still argue whether the corridors of power were more dangerous than the streets themselves, but tonight, your focus is on both: the delicate interplay of light, human ambition, and whispered words. The scent of baked bread from a nearby market mixes with the smoky tang of the city, an olfactory tapestry that somehow feels like a map of Tudor society itself. Courtiers hurry past in heavy cloaks, their shoes clicking sharply against the cobbles. You crane your neck to follow a pair of them, their conversation muffled but clearly filled with intrigue. Fringe tidbit. Some courtiers were known to consult astrologers before deciding whom to favor or when to attend certain events, a practice historians still debate in terms of its real influence. You smirk quietly. Imagining a noblewoman consulting Venus before choosing a gown seems both ridiculous and terrifyingly plausible. You slip through a narrow alley, avoiding a cart laden with barrels. The walls are plastered with notices, some mundane, others warning of plagues, taxes, or royal decrees. Lantern light flickers across the notices, throwing shadows that dance like conspirators in a secret meeting. You probably won't survive the thought that some of these decrees may have been timed according to planetary alignments, meant to impress or intimidate, though no one would admit it aloud. A group of musicians appears at a corner, their fiddles and pipes playing a tune that doesn't quite match the mood of the night. Their song, lively yet melancholic, seems to resonate with the distant tolling of a bell. Fringe observation. Street musicians were sometimes astrologers, informants in disguise, carrying messages through coded lyrics or gestures, though historians still argue how widespread this practice really was. You chuckle, thinking that if you were a musician, you'd probably stick to playing reels and let the stars handle the politics. You pause near a fountain, water catching the dim light like quicksilver. A child dips a hand in, laughing, while a street dog paws at the edge. Mainstream fact. Fountains were both practical sources of water and social hubs in Tudor London, where news, gossip, and sometimes coded information circulated freely. You probably won't survive noticing how even a simple splash seems like an echo of the night sky, tiny ripples mirroring distant constellations. The Queen's influence hangs in the air like a subtle perfume, felt but unseen. Courtiers move with a careful choreography, eyes darting, words measured. You remember the astronomer's charts and calculations. Every star could predict favor. Every planetary shift might signal a rival's rise. Fringe fact. Some astrologers argued that certain alignments indicated treachery within the court itself, though historians still debate whether these readings genuinely affected Elizabeth's decisions. You shiver slightly, realizing that even down here in the streets, the dance of power stretches invisibly above you. Lanterns throw long, quivering shadows against timber-framed buildings. A cat darts across your path, disappearing into the darkness, leaving only a faint echo of movement. You follow the twists and turns, catching snippets of conversations, whispers of favors granted, debts owed, or secret alliances. You probably won't survive noticing how even casual remarks could carry weight when interpreted through the lens of the stars. And that makes every step feel like treading a tightrope, suspended above both intrigue and superstition. You stop at a doorway, leaning against the cool wood to catch your breath. The smell of roasting meat drifts from a nearby tavern, mingling with the faint herbal aroma of someone burning sage to ward off illness, or perhaps bad luck. Fringe detail. Astrologers sometimes advised clients to burn specific herbs at particular planetary hours to enhance fortunes, though historians still debate the real efficacy versus the theatricality of the act. You inhale deeply, enjoying the sensory layering of superstition, practicality, and city life all at once. You peek through a window into a private gathering. A circle of candles illuminates faces tense with discussion, hands gesturing over parchment maps. You probably won't survive noticing the quiet interplay of secrets, the delicate weaving of trust and suspicion. Every glance, every whispered sentence seems to echo the calculations and predictions happening above in the observatory. In a city like this, power is often as intangible as starlight, and yet just as influential. As you continue, the wind picks up, carrying with it the faint scent of the river, the murmur of distant voices, and the occasional clang of metal from some far-off smithy. You imagine the astronomer watching from his tower, charts spread wide, calculating trajectories, planetary positions, perhaps even the fates of those moving unknowingly through these very streets. Mainstream fact. The Elizabethan court valued astrologers not just for navigation but for insight into political currents, though some dismissed them as charlatans. You probably won't survive marveling at how much of the city's rhythm, commerce, gossip, strategy, is silently choreographed alongside the stars. Finally, you round a corner into a quieter lane. Lanterns are fewer here. Shadows cling to walls like dark velvet. The echo of your own footsteps is almost overwhelming in its clarity. You feel the weight of observation, of knowledge, pressing softly against your senses. Fringe thought. Some claimed that certain street patterns aligned with astrological points to maximize influence or secrecy, though historians still argue how intentional such alignments were. You smirk at the thought, realizing even the streets themselves might be a map, just waiting for someone perceptive or reckless enough to notice. You pause beneath a half-fallen sign for the Celestial Rose, watching the faint light from a single upper window. Somewhere inside, a candle burns, illuminating charts and instruments that mirror your own observations above. You probably won't survive noticing the symmetry. The city and the sky, the astronomer and you, all entwined in an invisible pattern of light, shadow, and possibility. And in this quiet lane, the hum of Tudor London seems to soften, the night thick with potential, ready to reveal secrets to those daring or foolish enough to look closely. You step onto the cold, uneven cobbles, the night air thick with the scent of smoke, salt from the Thames, and the faint, sweet aroma of someone's late-blooming roses. Above you, the stars shine with a clarity that seems almost conspiratorial, daring you to notice patterns hidden to everyone else. You probably won't survive realizing how much these pinpricks of light dictate the undercurrents of power, superstition, and rumor coursing through Tudor London. Fringe observation. Some astrologers claim that comets, especially bright ones, were not just celestial phenomena but coded messages from the heavens, signaling political upheaval or personal fortune, though historians still argue how seriously these portents were taken. You glance upward, squinting, imagining the Queen herself interpreting these signals from the comfort of her chamber, confident that someone, somewhere, is charting her destiny. A comet streaks across the horizon, pale and sudden, like an angry brushstroke across the dark velvet sky. You pause, the sound of distant bells echoing in rhythm with your pulse. Mainstream fact: comets were meticulously recorded in observatory logs, often prompting commentary about wars, plagues, or changes in leadership. Fringe tidbit: some astrologers insisted that speaking a specific incantation while observing a comet could alter its effect on human affairs. You smirk and shake your head, imagining Londoners muttering spells beneath a night sky as icy as the river. You probably won't survive noticing the thrill and terror wrapped up in a single streak of light, the way it seems to stitch together superstition, politics, and fear. The streets are quieter here, shadows pooling beneath the overhangs of buildings and flickering lanterns. A rat scurries past, carrying some stolen scrap in its tiny teeth, and you think briefly about survival, both yours and the city. Fringe thought: some courtiers believed that celestial alignments could even influence vermin behavior, though historians still debate whether this belief had any traction beyond humorous anecdotes. You chuckle quietly to yourself, stepping carefully over the uneven stones, aware that observation is as much about patience as it is about noticing signs in the sky. A group of street performers dances nearby, their shadows long and contorted in the lantern light. You notice how their movements almost mirror the orbiting planets you studied above in the observatory. Mainstream fact: Elizabethan street performances often carried subtle moral, political, or allegorical messages. You probably won't survive realizing that even entertainment could be a subtle reflection of celestial order, that humor, art, and superstition were woven together like threads in a tapestry. You watch as one juggler tosses flaming balls into the night air, sparks flying like miniature stars, and you feel a strange sense of cosmic synchronicity, as if the city itself were performing a quiet homage to the heavens. You pause at a corner where a baker's window glows warmly. The aroma of roasting meat, fresh bread, and a hint of cinnamon wraps around you like a blanket. You imagine astrologers from the observatory peering down here, not just at the streets, but at the patterns of life. Who dines when, who hurries past, who pauses to gossip. Fringe detail. Some astrologers believe that observing mundane human behavior under specific planetary alignments could enhance predictive accuracy, though historians still argue about the method's legitimacy. You probably won't survive noticing the odd intimacy of this connection, the way celestial and terrestrial rhythms intermingle in subtle, nearly invisible ways. The Thames glints in the distance, reflecting lanterns and moonlight in uneven patches. Boats rock gently, moored for the night, and the smell of brine carries over the water. Mainstream fact: river navigation relied on both practical observation and occasional celestial guidance. Sailors often consulted star charts to align their journeys with tides and currents. You probably won't survive marveling at how life and livelihood are quietly tethered to stars. The city's pulse echoing celestial rhythms, whether its citizens realize it or not. You notice a small tavern tucked behind a row of larger houses. Through its open window, a candle illuminates a table crowded with patrons bent over maps, charts, and curious devices. Fringe thought. Rumor held that some astrologers and mathematicians met in taverns to share coded observations, using seemingly trivial details to convey sensitive intelligence. Historians still debate how often tavern walls served as inadvertent observatories or political salons. You grin at the idea, imagining the murmured exchanges under the flickering candlelight, your presence unnoticed, your imagination filling in the gaps. The comet arcs higher, casting a pale reflection on the river. You probably won't survive noticing the way London seems to bend under its influence, how even shadows look sharper, more charged, more alive. A child shouts from a distant street, laughter mixing with awe at the night sky. A dog barks in response. You feel strangely in tune with the city, as if standing at a crossroads where history, superstition, and science all converge. Your eyes wander to the constellations now fully revealed, Draco coiling across the sky, Orion's belt sharply defined, Cassiopeia leaning at its characteristic angle. Each star seems to carry not only its position but a coded message, a hidden layer of reality you were never meant to fully grasp. Fringe thought. Some astrologers recorded stars that were invisible to most, claiming only trained eyes could read them, though historians still debate whether these secret stars were intentional myths or practical tools. You probably won't survive feeling the weight of this knowledge pressing gently against your awareness, a reminder that some truths are both accessible and elusive. A sudden breeze carries the faint aroma of incense, perhaps from a distant chapel. You take a deep breath and close your eyes for a moment, letting the night settle in around you. The city hums softly, distant bells, murmured conversations, and the river's faint sigh all blending into a muted symphony. The comet, the stars, and the shadowed streets seem to pulse together, a quiet reminder that in Tudor London, nothing is purely mundane and nothing purely celestial. You lift your gaze one last time before turning toward the observatory again, catching the comet's tail just as it vanishes into the deeper sky. You probably won't survive forgetting how fleeting these moments are, the collision of human curiosity and cosmic spectacle. But that's why you keep watching, keep nodding, keep wondering. The celestial secrets of London tonight are yours to feel, to imagine, and to carry with a mix of awe and caution. You climb the worn stairs of the observatory again, the wind tugging at your cloak as if trying to push you back into the streets. The tower smells faintly of candle smoke, parchment, and something sweeter, lavender perhaps, or a hint of something perfumed that doesn't belong to you. And then, just as you straighten from the last step, the door creaks and you feel it. Elizabeth herself has arrived. The Queen's presence is immediate, commanding, yet oddly intimate. You probably won't survive noticing the sharp blend of awe, fear, and curiosity that rises in your chest. Fringe tidbit. Elizabeth was known to personally observe celestial events and question her astrologers, though historians still argue whether she relied on their advice or merely enjoyed the performance of knowledge. You swallow hard, suddenly aware that centuries of starlit observation have led to this singular moment. She glides in, her gown whispering across the floorboards, a faint clatter of pearls punctuating her steps. The scent of her lavender intensifies, wrapping around you, almost daring you to breathe too deeply. Mainstream fact: Elizabeth's meticulous attention to detail extended to her court and surroundings. She would personally inspect instruments, charts, and observations to ensure no error went unnoticed. You probably won't survive noticing how her eyes flicker from one brass instrument to another, lingering on a quadrant as though it might reveal the secret of the universe, or at least of her courtiers. The Queen leans slightly over a chart, tracing the path of Venus with a gloved finger. You feel the weight of centuries pressing in. The astronomer's notes, the comets, the coded positions, all now intersect with her gaze. Fringe observation. Some scholars argue that Elizabeth's fascination with astronomy was as much about control, monitoring court and country, as it was about genuine scientific curiosity. You smile faintly, imagining her whispering to Venus, "Bet keep an eye on the nobles tonight." You probably won't survive noticing the subtle blend of intelligence, playfulness, and calculated authority in every movement she makes. You clear your throat and gesture toward the brass astrolabe. "Your Majesty," you say softly, "this instrument tracks the stars' positions." She cuts you off with a slight shake of her head, eyes gleaming. "I know," she murmurs, her voice a gentle command wrapped in amusement. You probably won't survive the thrill of her attention. It's like staring at a star that suddenly decides to twinkle just for you. Fringe detail. Elizabeth often tested her astronomers by asking them impromptu questions, forcing them to reconcile theory with observation under her gaze. You shiver, knowing that any misstep here could be embarrassing, or worse, politically costly. She studies the comet you observed earlier, leaning slightly closer to a telescope. The brass lens catches candlelight, throwing flickers across the Queen's face. Mainstream fact: comets were taken seriously at court, sometimes influencing policy, diplomacy, or public declarations. You probably won't survive noticing the tension in her posture, curiosity mixed with caution, like someone reading a message meant to be cryptic. A servant enters quietly, bearing a small candle, but Elizabeth waves them back. You can feel her awareness brushing against you, a subtle reminder that observation is never neutral in a room where power is present. Fringe tidbit. Some astrologers claim that Elizabeth's presence heightened the accuracy of instruments, though historians still debate whether this was ritual, superstition, or mere coincidence. You grin, imagining the astronomer whispering, "Your Majesty improves the optics naturally." She steps back, hands folded, and surveys the tower, the charts, and you. "The stars," she says softly, almost to herself, "are curious, but so are we." You probably won't survive feeling the truth in that Elizabeth is a monarch, a student of the heavens, and a subtle manipulator of every observer in the room. Her presence transforms the tower from a mere observatory into a theater, where knowledge, power, and intrigue intertwine with the distant constellations above. You note the alignment of instruments, the careful placement of charts, and the subtle changes in candlelight. The Queen moves with a grace that suggests she is fully aware of how every element affects perception. Fringe observation. Historians still argue whether Elizabeth's involvement in astronomy was a genuine passion or a clever demonstration of authority, blending science and spectacle to reinforce her reign. You probably won't survive marveling at how seamlessly curiosity and control coexist in her presence, each gesture precise, intentional, and a little mischievous. Finally, she turns to you, eyes sparkling. "Remember," she says, almost whispering, "the stars tell stories, but they reveal them only to those willing to notice." And with that, she glides toward the door, leaving you in a hush of candlelight, parchment, and the lingering scent of lavender. You probably won't survive the quiet thrill of this encounter, yet it cements in your mind that observation is never purely academic. Every measurement, every chart, every note carries weight far beyond the tower walls. You sink back onto your stool, exhaling slowly, the Queen's presence still a soft hum in your thoughts. Outside, the city stretches in darkness, but you feel a connection between these streets, this tower, and the distant stars. The balance of power, knowledge, and wonder hums quietly, a secret rhythm that only the brave, or the foolish, might follow. And you, perched in this precarious nexus, are more acutely aware than ever of the delicate dance between curiosity and caution, between light and shadow, and between the observer and the observed. You linger near the brass astrolabe, fingers tracing the engraved lines as if trying to feel the very paths of the planets themselves. Outside, the night air carries a cool breeze, scented faintly with smoke and distant rosemary from the gardens below. You probably won't survive noticing how the air itself seems alive, a medium for both rumor and revelation. Tonight, you are not just a witness to celestial mechanics. You are caught in a debate as old as the observatory itself: astrology versus astronomy. Fringe tidbit. Some courtiers claim that the astrologers' calculations could predict everything from crop yields to romantic intrigue, though historians still argue whether these predictions genuinely guided Elizabeth's decisions or merely impressed her court. You adjust the telescope, aiming at a cluster of stars that have long fascinated scholars. Mainstream fact: the meticulous tracking of planetary movements allowed Tudor astronomers to refine calendars, predict eclipses, and guide navigation. But in this room, surrounded by charts and instruments, you realize that observation is never neutral. Every measurement can be interpreted multiple ways: by science, superstition, or someone eager to manipulate both. You probably won't survive noticing how thin the line is between knowledge and influence here. One wrong calculation or misread star could ripple through the court like a silent shockwave. A colleague, or perhaps a rival, leans over a chart, muttering about the positions of Saturn and Jupiter. Their voice is low, almost conspiratorial. Fringe observation. Astrologers often engaged in fierce debates, some claiming certain alignments favored the crown while others insisted they predicted treachery, though historians still argue how much these disputes affected real decision-making. You smirk at the thought, imagining two learned men arguing over whether a comet signals a royal marriage or a peasant revolt. You probably won't survive the irony that precision and superstition often share the same space, dancing in uneasy tandem. You move closer to a set of planetary spheres, miniature models of the heavens. Each sphere spins along delicate axles, designed to demonstrate complex orbits. Mainstream fact: these early planetariums were essential for teaching celestial mechanics, making abstract math tangible. You probably won't survive noticing how oddly intimate it feels to manipulate these tiny worlds, as if touching brass and wood could somehow shape the heavens themselves. Fringe detail. Some astrologers insisted that whispering the name of a noble while rotating the spheres could influence their fortune, though historians still debate whether this was practice or playful superstition. The debate intensifies as voices rise softly, words mingling with the faint rustle of parchment and candlelight. The stars dictate nothing, one says firmly. They only illustrate the possibilities, another counters. Yet the heavens have always reflected human affairs. One ignores them at their peril. You probably won't survive the thrill of standing in this intellectual storm, feeling the weight of centuries-old arguments pressing softly against your chest. Fringe observation. Historians still debate whether Elizabeth herself took these disputes seriously or enjoyed them as intellectual theater, a demonstration of her command over both men and knowledge. You glance through the telescope again, aligning it with Mars. The faint red glow seems almost imperious, a silent reminder that the universe does not bend for ambition, yet humans have always tried to make it so. Mainstream fact: Tudor astronomers documented planetary positions with extreme care, often consulting multiple instruments to ensure accuracy. Fringe tidbit. Some noted that planetary observations were recorded alongside personal predictions for courtiers, suggesting a blending of science, superstition, and political strategy. You probably won't survive realizing just how delicate this balance is, the margin between insight and folly measured in degrees of arc, not inches of paper. The air hums with tension and curiosity. You can almost feel the thoughts of every astronomer who has ever debated in this room, their energy lingering in the brass, wood, and parchment. The line between reason and belief blurs. One moment you are a scholar analyzing angles, the next a participant in a mystical ballet choreographed by stars. Fringe observation. Some debates centered on whether celestial events genuinely influenced human behavior, though historians still argue if these arguments ever shifted policy or merely entertained the court. You probably won't survive noticing how thrilling it is to occupy this liminal space where knowledge, speculation, and power intersect. You pause, letting your gaze drift to the faint glow of London through the shuttered windows. Lanterns, distant bells, and the occasional shout mingle with the quiet brilliance of the stars. In this moment, you recognize the tension that defines this room: observation as science, observation as art, and observation as a means of influence. You probably won't survive realizing how intoxicating it is, feeling as though every calculation could ripple beyond the observatory, touching the streets below, the palace above, and even the distant heavens themselves. You take a deep breath, brushing your hand over a planetary chart. The constellations above, instruments around you, and debates buzzing softly all converge into a singular thought. Understanding the stars is never purely academic. It is about curiosity, authority, and sometimes survival. Fringe tidbit. Some astrologers whispered that accurate knowledge of the heavens could provide leverage over rivals, though historians still debate the veracity and extent of such claims. You probably won't survive noticing that every gaze, every scribble, every careful alignment carries a weight far beyond the paper or brass on which it rests. As you sit quietly, the room settles into a soft hum of candlelight, the faint rustle of parchment, and the distant echo of the city. The debate has waned, but the tension lingers, a delicate line connecting the rational, the mystical, and the political. You probably won't survive the realization that in this observatory, observing is never passive. Each note, each glance, each whispered calculation shapes the stories told beneath the stars, and perhaps even the fate of those who walk the streets of London unaware. You lean over a cluttered table, eyes scanning the assortment of instruments laid out before you. Each one is a curiosity, a small testament to Tudor ingenuity and occasional eccentricity. There's a brass quadrant, its edges worn smooth from constant handling, and a set of strange lenses stacked in an odd arrangement, some so small you'd need a magnifying glass to see the markings. Fringe tidbit. One astronomer reportedly built a device that could supposedly capture starlight in a jar, though historians still argue whether it was ever functional or purely theatrical. You probably won't survive smiling at the absurdity while secretly wishing it worked. A wooden armillary sphere dominates one corner of the room, its rings spinning freely along brass pivots. You run a finger along its curves, marveling at the precision of the craftsmanship. Mainstream fact: armillary spheres were essential teaching tools, allowing astronomers to model the heavens mechanically and understand planetary movements visually. You probably won't survive feeling a strange kinship with the anonymous hands that polished, adjusted, and calibrated these rings centuries ago. Near a small shelf, you notice instruments with shapes so peculiar they almost look like props from a magician's cabinet. One resembles a tiny cannon, its barrel tipped with a lens. Another is a delicate arm with rotating discs that could almost pass for a musical device. Fringe observation. Some instruments were deliberately designed to impress visiting dignitaries or the Queen, blending function with spectacle, though historians still argue how much practical value these inventions held versus their theatricality. You grin at the thought, imagining a courtier stepping into the observatory and gasping, "By the stars, what sorcery is this?" You reach for a slender telescope, polished to a dull shine. Its eyepiece is so narrow that it feels almost intimate, as though peering through it is a private conversation with the stars themselves. Mainstream fact: telescopes in the Tudor period were still primitive, but they marked a shift toward more precise observation of celestial phenomena. Fringe tidbit: some astronomers claimed certain telescopes aligned the mind with the heavens, suggesting that perception itself could be enhanced, a notion historians debate for its metaphysical versus practical implications. You probably won't survive the temptation to test this claim, pressing your eye to the lens and imagining the universe unfolding in miniature before you. The table is littered with scribbled notes, some diagrams so precise they could be mistaken for blueprints, others scrawled in a hasty, almost frantic hand. You notice calculations of planetary angles, symbols for eclipses, and odd annotations in Latin and English. Fringe observation: some suggest that obscure symbols encoded political warnings or messages for select courtiers, though historians still argue whether these were practical codes or fanciful doodles. You probably won't survive the thrill of imagining a hidden narrative etched into every line and circle. In a corner, a small wooden box contains miniature globes and spheres, each rotating along tiny axles. You spin one carefully, watching a miniature Jupiter trace its path. Mainstream fact: these mini planetariums allowed scholars and the Queen to visualize celestial movements more intuitively. Fringe tidbit: rumor held that moving the spheres at specific planetary hours could improve courtly fortunes, though historians still debate whether this was ever taken seriously. You probably won't survive the quiet amusement at the blend of science, superstition, and human hope contained in this tiny universe. The observatory itself feels alive with the memory of previous nights. Candles burnt low, instruments adjusted meticulously, charts folded and unfolded countless times. You notice a small drawer slightly ajar. Inside, delicate parchment diagrams depict unusual constellations and comets, some annotated with playful sketches or cryptic notes. Fringe thought: some astronomers enjoyed embedding whimsical doodles in their charts, partly as a personal signature, partly to obscure sensitive observations from casual readers. You probably won't survive smiling at the notion that even the most serious science occasionally bends toward humor. You run your hands over the brass astrolabe again, feeling the cold metal beneath your fingertips. It's precise, beautiful, and slightly intimidating. Mainstream fact: the astrolabe allowed measurement of the altitude of celestial bodies and played a key role in navigation, astrology, and astronomical study. You probably won't survive noticing how tactile engagement makes the abstract real, how touching these instruments connects you to centuries of observation, calculation, and quiet obsession. Outside, the city hums faintly, its lights flickering like distant stars mirroring those above. You pause, letting the juxtaposition sink in, instruments in hand, charts before you, and the infinite night sky stretching beyond the tower walls. Fringe detail: some astronomers believed that hidden instruments and secret devices allowed them to decode messages from the heavens, though historians still argue whether these claims were serious or theatrical. You probably won't survive the sense that every polished lens, every carved knob, every faintly glowing chart carries both knowledge and mystery, waiting for a careful eye to uncover. As you step back and take in the room, a quiet thrill pulses through you. These hidden instruments are not merely tools. They are keys to understanding, theater props, talismans, and occasionally mirrors of human ambition and whimsy. You probably won't survive noticing the interplay of art, science, and subtle deception in each crafted piece. And yet, for all their eccentricity, they share a singular purpose: to bring the heavens closer to the mortal gaze, even if only for a fleeting, magnificent moment. You settle into a high-backed chair near the largest window, letting your gaze drift toward the Thames, where moonlight shimmers off the water like scattered diamonds. The city seems quieter here, muted except for distant calls and the faint clatter of a boat's oar. You probably won't survive noticing how peaceful London looks from above, unaware that the astronomer and his instruments are quietly charting destinies, tracing patterns that will ripple unseen through lives far below. Fringe tidbit. Some astrologers claim that certain rivers and waterways reflected celestial influences, a theory historians still debate in terms of its significance versus poetic imagination. You smile faintly, letting the thought settle as you lean forward to examine the charts before you. The table is cluttered with parchments covered in calculations, planetary sketches, and notes written in a careful, looping hand. Mainstream fact: Tudor astronomers documented star positions, planetary movements, and lunar phases meticulously, creating charts that could guide both navigation and astrological predictions. You probably won't survive noticing the sheer dedication, the hours of frozen nights and careful observation, all for an audience that might never fully understand, or even notice, the effort. Fringe observation. Some astrologers secretly embedded commentary on court politics in their notes, though historians still debate whether these were deliberate messages or accidental coincidences. You trace the inked lines with your finger, imagining what secrets they might conceal. A candle flickers, casting dancing shadows across the room. The brass armillary sphere in the corner catches the light, throwing complex shapes across the walls. You probably won't survive noticing how the room transforms into a miniature cosmos, shadows moving in ways that mirror celestial motions. Fringe tidbit. One astronomer was said to have deliberately arranged his instruments so that candlelight would simulate planetary orbits, though historians still argue whether this was instructional or theatrical. You grin at the playful thought, imagining a starry performance just for you. You glance at a small collection of manuscripts in a corner. Each is covered with cryptic notes and sketches, some barely legible. Mainstream fact: handwritten manuscripts were the primary way astronomers recorded observations, often including marginalia that revealed personal thoughts or eccentric theories. Fringe observation. Some of these notes may have contained encrypted messages intended for select courtiers, though historians still debate how widespread or effective this practice was. You probably won't survive the thrill of imagining hidden secrets, woven into seemingly mundane calculations. Your fingers brush against an astrolabe resting near the edge of the table. The metal is cool and smooth, the engraved lines precise. Mainstream fact: astrolabes were versatile, capable of measuring celestial angles, telling time, and even predicting the positions of the sun and moon. Fringe detail. Rumor suggested that the astrolabe could reveal the fate of those in power if interpreted correctly, though historians still debate whether such readings were taken seriously or dismissed as theatrical. You probably won't survive feeling the strange intimacy of holding centuries of human curiosity and superstition in your hands. The wind shifts outside, rattling the shutters, carrying distant sounds of bells, oars, and footsteps. You probably won't survive noticing how the observatory itself feels alive, as if attuned to both the city and the cosmos. Fringe observation. Some astrologers claim that atmospheric changes could influence celestial readings, a notion historians still debate, though it speaks to the meticulous care with which they treated every element of observation. You peer through a small telescope aimed at Jupiter, catching the faint, imperious glow of the planet. Mainstream fact: Jupiter's apparent movement was carefully tracked because astrologers believed it influenced political fortune and public affairs. Fringe tidbit. One astrologer recorded that whispering a noble's name while observing Jupiter could enhance their favor, though historians still argue whether this was symbolic, superstitious, or strategic. You probably won't survive imagining the astronomer leaning closer, whispering secrets to the planet as though it might actually listen. A sudden creak makes you glance toward the door. The wind seems to conspire with the shadows, sending your pulse up. You settle, reminding yourself that every element in this room, the instruments, charts, candlelight, carries history, intent, and a whisper of eccentricity. Fringe observation. Some astrologers deliberately left minor errors in public charts to test who truly understood them, though historians still debate whether these were practical pedagogical tools or subtle pranks. You probably won't survive the thought that every detail could be a test, a joke, or a warning. You shift back in your chair, letting the candlelight wash over the charts. Outside, the Thames reflects the faint glow of lanterns. Above, constellations twist and shimmer. You probably won't survive noticing the simultaneity of so many layers: the tangible city below, the room brimming with instruments, and the infinite sky above, all converging into a single, delicate moment of observation, contemplation, and quiet revelation. You lift your gaze one last time to the heavens, tracing familiar constellations: Draco, Orion, and Cassiopeia. Fringe tidbit: some astrologers believe that these stars could speak only to those trained to read them, though historians still debate whether this was a real method or playful legend. You probably won't survive the shiver of understanding that observation here is as much about perception as it is about calculation, an interplay of knowledge, intuition, and the quiet thrill of hidden truths. The room exhales with you, filled with the faint warmth of candle wax, the metallic tang of brass, and the soft rustle of parchment. You probably won't survive noticing that this observatory, these instruments, and these charts are not just tools. They are conduits for curiosity, imagination, and subtle influence. And for tonight, in this quiet intersection of city and cosmos, you are part of that continuum, a witness to both the precision and the whimsy of human endeavor. You step away from the table and move toward the window, letting your hands glide along the cool wooden sill. The city sprawls beneath you, a tangle of shadow and light, smoke curling from chimneys like phantom fingers reaching for the stars. You probably won't survive noticing how small and yet vibrant London feels from this height, as if the streets themselves are constellations in miniature, their citizens tiny planets in orbit around their own ambitions. Fringe tidbit: some astrologers believe that patterns of city lights and street layouts could mirror celestial arrangements, though historians still argue whether this was intentional or merely fanciful thinking. A faint rustle behind you reminds you of the ever-present tension in the observatory, charts shifting slightly, instruments humming softly, shadows playing tricks on the edges of perception. Mainstream fact: careful observation was key in Tudor astronomy. Instruments needed precise alignment, charts meticulous calibration, and even the tiniest environmental change could affect measurements. You probably won't survive noticing the obsessive care required, the way even a stray breath or flicker of candlelight could ripple through hours of painstaking work. You glance at a map of the heavens spread across the table, noting the careful plotting of the moon's phases, the looping paths of Venus and Mars, and the ominous trajectory of a recently recorded comet. Fringe observation: some astrologers claim that specific comets foretold particular events in the royal household, though historians still debate whether Elizabeth or her court ever adjusted policy based on these predictions. You smirk, imagining courtiers nervously checking star charts before attending a banquet. The wind rattles the shutters, carrying the faint scent of the river and distant fires. You lean closer to an armillary sphere, tracing the rings with a careful finger, feeling the weight of centuries of observation condensed into wood and brass. Mainstream fact: these spheres were not only teaching tools but practical models for understanding the relative positions of planets and stars. You probably won't survive the sense of awe at holding such history literally in your hands, connecting tactile sensation with centuries of celestial knowledge. A servant's distant footsteps echo down the stairwell, but inside the observatory, time seems suspended. Fringe tidbit: rumor has it some astrologers recorded celestial events in ways deliberately obscure, hiding messages for those in the know, though historians still debate whether these were genuine codes or playful exercises in secrecy. You probably won't survive the thrill of imagining someone discovering hidden meanings in charts you have yet to fully decipher. You lift your gaze toward the telescope, peering at Saturn, its rings faintly luminous against the dark sky. Mainstream fact: Saturn was observed closely not just for its striking appearance, but because its slow movement made it a reference point for other calculations. Fringe observation. Some astrologers claimed that Saturn's position could influence temperament and courtly disputes, though historians still argue about the real impact of these interpretations. You probably won't survive the shiver that runs through you, feeling the weight of both scientific observation and superstition converging on a single point of light. A draft snakes through the room, rustling parchment and stirring candle flames. You take a step back and notice the subtle alignment of instruments across the observatory. Quadrants, astrolabes, and planetary models, all poised for meticulous measurement. Fringe detail. Some astronomers arrange their devices not only for precision, but to convey subtle messages to visiting dignitaries, though historians still debate whether this was deliberate theater or incidental artistry. You probably won't survive marveling at the ingenuity, the combination of science, strategy, and spectacle contained within these carefully curated arrangements. The moon rises higher, casting silvery light across the city. You probably won't survive noticing how the Thames gleams like liquid starlight, reflecting lanterns and distant fires in patterns that mimic the constellations above. Each ripple, shadow, and glint seems to echo the movements you've been charting all night. Your gaze drifts back to the comet now, which has begun to fade but still leaves a faint trail across the horizon. Fringe tidbit. Some astrologers claim that observing the fatting of comets could indicate the resolution of a political crisis or a shift in royal favor, though historians still debate the accuracy and seriousness of such claims. You probably won't survive the quiet thrill at realizing that even as it disappears from view, the comet's presence continues to influence both thought and action within the court. Finally, you sink back into your chair, letting the hum of the city and the glow of the candlelight settle around you. The charts, instruments, and stars all align into a tapestry of observation, superstition, and human curiosity. You probably won't survive noticing how delicate and intertwined it all is: the life of the city, the motion of the heavens, and the quiet work of those who seek to understand both. In this suspended moment, you feel a rare kinship with the astronomers who have occupied this space for decades, centuries, tracing paths invisible to the untrained eye. You rise from your chair, stretching slightly, feeling the chill of the night air creeping through the open shutters. Outside, the city seems almost dreamlike, lanterns flickering along cobbled streets, smoke curling in lazy spirals, and distant bells tolling a rhythm that feels both ancient and immediate. You probably won't survive noticing how the ordinary bustle of London can seem like a carefully choreographed reflection of the celestial patterns you've spent hours studying. Fringe tidbit. Some astrologers suggested that observing the timing of mundane events, market openings, bell tolls, or tavern closings, could reveal the hidden order of the heavens, though historians still argue whether this was serious methodology or poetic fancy. You drift toward a small table cluttered with charts, each one dense with careful lines, symbols, and annotations. Mainstream fact: Tudor astronomers relied heavily on such charts to track lunar and planetary movements, often compiling years of observation into single, precise documents. You probably won't survive noticing the tactile thrill of touching a chart that could map the fate of kings, courtiers, or entire cities. Fringe observation. Some charts contained marginal doodles, tiny sketches of imagined beasts or coded notes intended to amuse or mislead, though historians still debate the prevalence and purpose of these additions. A candle flickers, sending shadows dancing across the walls, and you watch them morph and stretch like celestial spirits. You probably won't survive imagining the astronomers of old leaning over these very charts, quills scratching in the dim light, whispering about planets, omens, and courtly intrigues. Fringe detail. Some astrologers reported that observing stars while performing rituals or recitations could enhance predictive accuracy, though historians still debate whether these practices were taken seriously or performed theatrically. Your attention shifts to a miniature armillary sphere in the corner, its rings catching the candlelight and throwing delicate shadows across the room. Mainstream fact: armillary spheres were educational models used to demonstrate the movement of celestial bodies relative to the Earth, and to teach both mathematics and astrology. You probably won't survive running your fingers along the rings, imagining them spinning, aligning, and somehow orchestrating both the heavens and the lives below. A distant laugh reaches you from the street, accompanied by the faint clatter of a cart. The city feels alive yet muted, a living organism that continues regardless of observation. Fringe tidbit: some astrologers believe that distant sounds could carry celestial significance, interpreting street noise as echoes of planetary influence, though historians still debate the seriousness of these claims. You probably won't survive the mix of amusement and curiosity that such a thought inspires. You glance at a brass astrolabe sitting on a windowsill, polished to a soft glow. Mainstream fact: the astrolabe was a versatile tool, capable of measuring celestial altitudes, telling time, and even predicting the rising of important stars. Fringe observation: some astrologers claim that manipulating an astrolabe at certain hours could influence outcomes in the royal court, though historians still argue whether such practices were symbolic or believed literally. You probably won't survive nodding the seductive authority of this simple, elegant device. How such a small instrument holds the power of knowledge, superstition, and subtle influence. The comet you tracked earlier is now gone, but its ghost seems to linger in the faint glow of the candlelight, reflected in charts and instruments alike. You probably won't survive noticing how memory, observation, and imagination intertwine here. The city, the heavens, and the observatory all pulse with stories waiting to be interpreted. Fringe detail: some astrologers documented comets not just for prediction but to teach lessons of vigilance, patience, and attention to detail, though historians still debate whether this was didactic or superstitious. You step closer to a window, peering down at the Thames, where moonlight shimmers and lanterns flicker like tiny terrestrial stars. Mainstream fact: the Thames was central to trade, communication, and the daily rhythm of Tudor London, and its reflection of the sky made it a convenient natural reference for observations. You probably won't survive the quiet awe at seeing how terrestrial and celestial movements mirror each other, city and cosmos dancing together in patterns only subtly understood. Your gaze drifts back inside, to the charts, instruments, and the faint scratch of quill against parchment. Fringe tidbit: some astronomers left deliberate errors in charts, designed to test apprentices or confuse rivals, though historians still argue about how widespread this playful secrecy was. You probably won't survive the thrill of knowing that even in precision, there is room for mischief, imagination, and challenge. Finally, you let yourself sink into the chair again, listening to the faint hum of the city, the distant tolling of bells, and the soft flicker of candlelight. Mainstream fact: observatories were both workspaces and sanctuaries, where scholars could contemplate the heavens uninterrupted, recording both scientific observation and human curiosity. You probably won't survive noticing how intimate and timeless this room feels, a nexus where knowledge, power, and wonder intertwine, and where your own sense of awe becomes part of the ongoing story. You rise from the chair and move toward the corner where a small telescope rests on a tripod, its brass polished to a muted glow. The night is deep now, quiet but for the faint hum of the city far below. You probably won't survive noticing how intimate it feels to peer through this narrow lens, as though the universe itself has offered a private glance, reserved for those patient enough to watch. Fringe tidbit: some astronomers claim that prolonged observation through telescopes could align one's mind with the stars, though historians still debate whether this was practical advice or poetic metaphor. Peering through the lens, you catch Jupiter again, its faint, commanding glow cutting through the darkness. Mainstream fact: Jupiter's movement and position were closely tracked because astrologers believed it influenced power, fortune, and the tides of politics. You probably won't survive the thrill of realizing that a small instrument in a tower in London might have been used to interpret events affecting the entire kingdom. Fringe observation. Some claim that whispering a name while observing Jupiter could subtly shift fate, though historians still argue whether such practices were symbolic, superstitious, or seriously intended. You shift slightly, catching Mars on the edge of your vision. Its fiery hue is unmistakable against the deep indigo sky. Mainstream fact: Mars, associated with war and conflict, often carried omens in both astrology and folklore. Fringe tidbit: some astrologers would measure the anger of Mars over a courtier's decisions, though historians still debate how literally such readings were taken. You probably won't survive the shiver that runs down your spine, as the planet seems to pulse in response to human affairs. Turning back inside, you notice a small drawer slightly open, revealing instruments so delicate they almost seem fragile enough to shatter at a whisper. Fringe observation: some tools were designed specifically for demonstration to the queen or visiting nobles, blending function with the theater of science, though historians still argue how much these displays influenced perception versus understanding. You probably won't survive marveling at the precision and artistry required to make instruments both accurate and impressive. A faint breeze drifts through the shutters, carrying the scent of incense from a nearby chapel and the distant tang of the river. You probably won't survive noticing how the observatory feels suspended between worlds, the earthy city below, the celestial expanse above, and this quiet, dimly lit room in between. Mainstream fact: observatories were carefully designed to optimize viewing conditions, minimizing interference from both weather and city lights. Fringe tidbit: some astrologers insisted that proper ventilation and fragrant smoke enhanced clarity of observation, though historians still debate the validity of this claim. You walk to the brass astrolabe, fingers tracing the engraved lines. Mainstream fact: astrolabes were essential tools for measuring the altitude of stars and calculating celestial positions with precision. Fringe observation: some astrologers claimed that spinning an astrolabe at particular planetary hours could subtly influence outcomes in human affairs, though historians still debate the extent to which such beliefs were seriously held. You probably won't survive feeling the weight of centuries of curiosity, calculation, and superstition resting in your hands. Your eyes wander across the charts pinned to the walls, crowded with notes on eclipses, planetary alignments, and unusual constellations. Fringe detail: some astrologers left encoded commentary on political events within chart margins, though historians still argue whether these messages were taken seriously or intended as playful speculation. You probably won't survive imagining a future courtier discovering these hidden notes centuries later, piecing together the intersection of science, art, and intrigue. Outside, a distant bell tolls, echoing faintly across the Thames. You probably won't survive noticing how the rhythm of the city below seems to correspond, if only poetically, with the measured cycles of the heavens above. Mainstream fact: Elizabethan society often interpreted celestial events in tandem with human activity, though the accuracy of these interpretations varied widely. Fringe observation: some astrologers believed the timing of bells, church services, or market openings could enhance celestial influence, though historians still debate the legitimacy of such correlations. You return to the telescope, adjusting it carefully to focus on a newly risen constellation. The stars shimmer in subtle patterns, whispering secrets only visible to the diligent observer. You probably won't survive the faint thrill of connection between instrument, observer, and sky, realizing that every moment in the observatory is a dialogue across time and space. Fringe detail: some astrologers suggested that attentive observation of these patterns could forewarn political or personal fortune, though historians still debate whether these claims held practical weight. Finally, you sink back into your chair, candlelight reflecting off polished brass and parchment. The observatory feels alive with centuries of curiosity, debate, and quiet eccentricity. You probably won't survive noticing how each instrument, chart, and calculation carries traces of human imagination, ambition, and wonder. For tonight, the city, the stars, and the room itself are entwined in a delicate choreography of observation, insight, and the thrill of secrets glimpsed just beyond reach. You push back from the chair, stretching your arms and glance around the observatory. Candlelight glimmers off brass instruments, casting reflections that seem to shimmer like distant galaxies. You probably won't survive noticing how the room itself feels like a miniature universe. Every chart, sphere, and lens a star in a carefully orchestrated constellation of knowledge and intrigue. Fringe tidbit. Some astrologers claim that arranging instruments in specific geometric patterns could amplify predictive insight, though historians still debate whether this was practical or simply a playful superstition. Your gaze drifts to a small shelf where a collection of manuscripts leans haphazardly against one another. The pages are dense with calculations, sketches, and the occasional whimsical doodle. Mainstream fact. Handwritten manuscripts were central to Tudor astronomy, serving as both scientific records and teaching tools. Fringe observation. Some notes contained obscure political references, subtle warnings, or inside jokes, though historians still argue whether these were intended for genuine communication or amusement. You probably won't survive the thrill of imagining a future scholar unraveling the layered meanings hidden within these pages. You move to the telescope, adjusting it toward a faint, newly risen star cluster. Its pinprick brilliance feels almost conspiratorial, as if the heavens themselves are challenging you to interpret their secrets. Mainstream fact. Accurate tracking of star positions was crucial for both navigation and astrological predictions. Fringe tidbit. Rumor had it that some astronomers whispered names or recited short verses while observing stars to enhance interpretive clarity, though historians still debate whether this practice was symbolic or taken literally. You probably won't survive the shiver of realizing that ritual, observation, and imagination intertwine in ways that defy neat categorization. Outside, the city's muted sounds reach you, the distant clip-clop of horses, the occasional shout from the street, and the faint murmur of water along the Thames. You probably won't survive noticing how these earthly rhythms seem to echo the orderly march of celestial bodies, a reminder that human life and the cosmos are subtly intertwined. Fringe observation. Some astrologers suggested that mundane events could reflect or be influenced by planetary positions, though historians still debate how seriously these claims were taken. You circle the armillary sphere, watching the rings spin gently on their axles. Mainstream fact. Armillary spheres were essential educational tools for visualizing the complex motions of celestial bodies around the Earth. Fringe detail. Some astrologers incorporated playful or cryptic markings on the spheres to signal secret interpretations, though historians still argue how widespread or influential these were. You probably won't survive the delight of imagining that each small detail, each subtle mark, carries centuries of thought and speculation. A candle flickers, casting moving shadows across the floor and charts. You probably won't survive noticing how these shadows almost animate the constellations, turning the room into a living tableau of cosmic motion. Fringe tidbit. Rumor held that the interplay of candlelight and instrument shadows could enhance observational insight, though historians still debate whether this was a serious method or charming superstition. You lean over the brass astrolabe, adjusting its arms carefully. Mainstream fact. Astrolabes allowed precise measurement of star altitudes and time, critical for both astronomers and astrologers. Fringe observation. Some astrologers claimed that aligning the astrolabe at specific hours could subtly influence human fortune, though historians still argue whether such claims were believed seriously or were playful myth. You probably won't survive noticing the seductive elegance of this instrument. how its cold, precise curves seem to pulse with both knowledge and possibility. Turning your attention back to the charts on the wall, you notice detailed sketches of lunar phases and planetary paths, some annotated with curious symbols. Fringe detail. Some astrologers embedded coded instructions or cryptic messages for the Queen's eyes only, though historians still debate the frequency and intent of such secretive notations. You probably won't survive imagining a hidden conversation between astronomer and monarch, written across centuries of careful observation. The observatory hums with quiet life. The faint rustle of parchment, the shimmer of polished brass, and the distant whisper of wind outside. You probably won't survive noticing how this confluence of motion, calculation, and imagination transforms the room into a nexus where human curiosity, ambition, and superstition intersect seamlessly. Mainstream fact. Elizabethan astronomers balanced empirical observation with cultural and political demands, navigating a delicate interplay of science and courtly expectation. Finally, you sink back into your chair, letting your gaze drift toward the heavens. Fringe tidbit. Some astrologers believed that observing certain constellations could heighten intuition or sharpen foresight, though historians still debate whether this was practiced earnestly or symbolically. You probably won't survive the soft awe that settles in your chest, realizing that the observatory, the city, and the distant stars are connected in a dance as intricate as any courtly intrigue, and just as subtle. You push yourself upright, stretching, and glance once more at the window. The moon hangs high over the Thames, silvering the water with a delicate shimmer. You probably won't survive noticing how quiet the city seems from up here, as if the streets themselves are holding their breath, leaving only the distant bells and the occasional splash of water to mark the passage of time. Fringe tidbit. Some astrologers believed that moonlight reflected off water could subtly affect readings of instruments or even influence interpretations of celestial events, though historians still debate whether this was ever seriously applied or just charming folklore. Your eyes drift to the armillary sphere, its rings spinning silently on their brass pivots. Mainstream fact. These spheres were central for visualizing the complex movements of planets and stars, providing a tangible model for both instruction and personal study. You probably won't survive noticing the almost hypnotic rhythm of the rotating rings, their movement a quiet echo of the heavens above. Fringe observation. Some astronomers inscribed tiny secret markers or initials onto the spheres to test apprentices or amuse themselves, though historians still argue about how widespread this practice was. A candle flickers across a nearby chart, illuminating the careful tracking of Mars, recent movement, and Venus, subtle shifts. Mainstream fact. Planetary tracking was vital for both astrology and navigation, with careful logs informing decisions from crop planting to courtly predictions. You probably won't survive feeling the thrill of connecting these precise movements with imagined influence over human affairs. Fringe tidbit. One astrologer claimed that combining observations of Mars and Venus could predict the success of a royal negotiation, though historians still debate whether this was taken seriously or merely entertained in courtly conversation. You lean toward the telescope, adjusting the lens to catch the faint glimmer of a distant star cluster. Its light seems almost impossibly far, yet your small instrument brings it close enough to study, to map, to consider. You probably won't survive the intimacy of that connection, how the universe, so vast, suddenly feels personal, delicate, and almost playful in its accessibility. Fringe observation. Some astrologers claim that certain star clusters were portals of insight, though historians still argue whether this was symbolic or part of an actual observational method. A soft draft brushes through the room, stirring charts and instruments. You probably won't survive noticing the way the observatory feels alive, as if it's breathing along with you, a small vessel suspended between London's streets and the infinite sky. Mainstream fact. Observatories were designed to maximize visibility and reduce interference, but the architecture also created a quiet, almost sacred space for contemplation. Fringe tidbit. Rumor has it that the arrangement of instruments and charts was sometimes designed to impress or intimidate visitors, though historians still debate whether this was intended as practical strategy or theatrical flair. You run a finger along the brass astrolabe, feeling the engraved lines and subtle curves beneath your touch. Mainstream fact: the astrolabe was a cornerstone of astronomical study, useful for calculating altitude, time, and planetary positions. Fringe observation. Some astrologers claim that manipulating the astrolabe during certain hours could subtly affect outcomes in human affairs, though historians still debate the seriousness of these claims. You probably won't survive noticing how tactile interaction connects observer to cosmos, merging calculation with ritual in a single delicate act. Your gaze drifts back to the charts on the walls, filled with precise notes, curious doodles, and occasional cryptic symbols. Fringe tidbit. Some astronomers embedded political commentary, hidden messages, or playful codes in their charts, though historians still argue about the intent or seriousness of these inscriptions. You probably won't survive imagining a secret conversation preserved across centuries, encoded in careful marks on parchment. Outside, the faint sounds of the Thames and distant footsteps mingle with the occasional toll of a bell. You probably won't survive noticing how the pulse of the city complements the measured, rhythmic observations of the observatory, a human heartbeat mirroring the eternal patterns above. Mainstream fact: Elizabethan astronomers often observed daily life alongside celestial movements, blending empirical study with cultural context to create holistic understanding. Finally, you settle into your chair again, the candlelight softening, shadows lengthening and blending with the polished brass and parchment. Fringe tidbit. Some astrologers believe that the quiet hum of the night, combined with careful observation, could heighten insight, though historians still debate whether this was a serious practice or poetic reflection. You probably won't survive the quiet awe that settles over you, realizing that observation here is never just science. It is curiosity, ritual, imagination, and subtle power intertwined. You lean back in your chair for the final stretch of the night, letting the soft flicker of candlelight wash over the brass instruments and parchment strewn across the table. The city outside has quieted further. Only the faint ripple of the Thames and distant lanterns mark the passage of time. You probably won't survive noticing how the world feels suspended, caught between the terrestrial rhythm below and the vast, patient motion of the heavens above. Fringe tidbit. Some astrologers whispered that observing in this calm, near-silent state could sharpen the mind's connection to celestial patterns, though historians still debate whether such practices were serious or symbolic. You lift your gaze to the telescope, now aimed at a faint constellation rising in the east. Mainstream fact: careful mapping of constellations was central to Tudor astronomy, guiding navigation, predicting seasonal shifts, and informing astrology. Fringe observation. Some astrologers argued that the arrangement of stars could subtly influence political or personal decisions, though historians still debate the extent of any real-world impact. You probably won't survive the hum of fascination that rises in your chest, the blend of wonder and quiet tension that has accompanied you through this night. Turning back inside, your hands brush over the armillary sphere, feeling its rings spin smoothly beneath your fingertips. Mainstream fact: armillary spheres provided both teaching utility and a visual representation of the celestial order. Fringe detail. Rumor held that adjusting the rings in particular sequences could enhance an astrologer's reading of human events, though historians still argue whether this was practiced seriously or enjoyed purely for theatrical effect. You probably won't survive noticing how each instrument, each chart, and each observation blends rigor with whimsy, precision with imagination. The faint smell of burning wax and polished brass mingles with the chill of night air drifting through the shutters. You probably won't survive noticing how tactile and sensory the experience of observation becomes. The weight of a quill, the cool metal of an astrolabe, the rustle of parchment, and the faint hum of candlelight merging into a quiet orchestra of study and contemplation. Your eyes wander over the charts pinned carefully on the walls, each filled with planetary paths, lunar phases, and cryptic annotations. Fringe observation. Some astrologers embedded subtle political warnings or playful codes in these charts, though historians still debate their purpose or efficacy. You probably won't survive imagining a future scholar piecing together centuries-old secrets from these careful scribbles, tracing the overlap of observation, ambition, and human curiosity. Outside, the moonlight dances across the water, reflecting lanterns like scattered stars mirroring the heavens. Mainstream fact: Tudor astronomers often relied on such reflections to cross-check observations and calibrate instruments. Fringe tidbit: some claimed that lunar reflections could subtly influence intuition or perception during observation, though historians still argue whether these ideas were literal or metaphorical. You probably won't survive the quiet magic of seeing human ingenuity and natural beauty converge in a single, fleeting moment. You reach for the brass astrolabe one last time, running your fingers along its precise engravings. Mainstream fact: astrolabes were used to measure celestial angles, calculate time, and navigate both terrestrial and celestial maps. Fringe observation: some astrologers whispered that spinning the astrolabe at certain hours could align human intention with the cosmos, though historians still debate the seriousness of such claims. You probably won't survive the thrill of touching an object that has guided both science and superstition across generations. The candlelight wanes, the shadows lengthen, and you feel the quiet pulse of the observatory settle around you. Fringe tidbit: rumor held that these quiet, candle-lit hours were when the greatest insights occurred, when observation, meditation, and imagination converged most perfectly, though historians still debate the veracity of such accounts. You probably won't survive noticing how everything, the charts, instruments, candlelight, and night sky, works together in a delicate choreography of knowledge and wonder. Finally, you let yourself relax completely, leaning back as the city hums softly below, and the stars continue their silent, majestic journey. You probably won't survive the deep satisfaction of knowing that in this room, at this hour, you have glimpsed the extraordinary intersection of human curiosity, scientific rigor, and subtle theatricality. Mainstream fact: Elizabethan astronomers combined empirical observation with cultural context, producing work that was simultaneously practical, philosophical, and artistic. For one last time, your gaze rises to the heavens, constellations stretching infinitely above, a reminder of the vastness beyond. Fringe observation: some astrologers insisted that simply witnessing the stars with care and attention could sharpen insight, though historians still debate whether this was symbolic or practical. You probably won't survive the lingering sense of awe and quiet reverence, knowing that even in centuries past, people stood here just as you do, tracing lines, spinning spheres, and dreaming beneath the same stars. The candle burns low now, its glow softening into amber pools across parchment and brass. You breathe slowly, letting the rhythm of the city below seep into your own pulse, gentle and unhurried. Outside, the Thames glimmers faintly, the occasional ripple catching moonlight like a secret being whispered across the water. You can almost feel the night exhale around you, carrying with it the distant scent of smoke, river, and cold stone. Each sound, the faint toll of a bell, a distant footfall, the soft sigh of wind, blends seamlessly into the background hum of this observatory, a sanctuary suspended between earth and sky. Your hands rest lightly on a chart, fingers tracing the faint, precise lines, the tiny annotations that have traveled through centuries. You let your mind drift, imagining the astronomers who once stood here, adjusting instruments, whispering notes, tracing the heavens with meticulous care. You probably won't survive the quiet thrill of connecting with them across time, realizing that curiosity, wonder, and devotion leave subtle traces that outlast centuries. The armillary sphere rotates slowly in your mind's eye, the ring spinning with infinite patience, guiding your thoughts across planets, stars, and constellations. The astrolabe feels impossibly delicate yet unshakably precise, a bridge between human hands and celestial order. You probably won't survive the soft, lingering awe of realizing that observation is both act and meditation, science and imagination, curiosity and reverence entwined. Now the night deepens further. The city sleeps beneath you and the stars stretch endlessly above. You let your gaze soften, your muscles relax, your breath steady. Each instrument, chart, and whisper of the past fades gently into memory, leaving only the calm sense of wonder, connection, and quiet delight. The universe above continues its silent, patient dance, and you are here, a small witness to its infinite choreography. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Sweet dreams.